no trial needed and no election needed. Donald Trump's ineligibility to hold office is, however, only hypothetical unless and until, as Ludick said, the officials who are in charge of voting begin taking action. Now, that was last week. This week, the journalist and attorney Dean Obeidallah is trying to start a national movement to compel those officials to act. He wrote this week about how he himself filed a complaint to disqualify Donald Trump from the ballot, and he is urging others to do the same. Joining me now is my old friend Dean Obeidallah. As I said, he's an attorney. He's a columnist for MSNBC Daily. He's the host of the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Radio and a longtime friend of our show. Okay, let's get down to this thing. Sure. I got the Constitution. Excellent. It does seem clear. It does seem very clear what they're saying. What Ludig and Tribe were saying was that this is really up to, generally speaking, the secretaries of state. They're the ones who are going to get the filing when Donald Trump in 50 states files to be the president of the United States. And normally they say, were you born here? Am I satisfied that you're born here? Are you 35 years of age or greater? And we're done. What these guys are saying and what you're saying is, no, there's another matter to consider. Have you been involved in an insurrection?
Absolutely. And there are people who said, well, this is some parliamentary procedure, or, you know, can we really use this? I want to remind people, it's the Constitution.
Right.
It's the 14th Amendment. You don't dismiss the First Amendment. We don't dismiss the Second. We can't dismiss the 14th Amendment. This is part of the Constitution. It says if you've been involved in an insurrection after, you know, pledging an oath, and or given aid and comfort to the insurrectionists. I think Donald Trump's done both, to be honest with you. But to me, the key is a New Mexico case. Last year, Ontario County, Couy Griffin, head of Cowboys for Trump, the court had a trial. They heard testimony. What was an insurrection under the 14th Amendment by the terms of the people who drafted it? Right. And the first determination, yes, this was an insurrection. The idea that assemblage of people who are trying to prevent the execution of a federal law through violence or intimidation. So they had that. Second, did Griffin engage in it? And they said yes, and they looked at his conduct. He brought people to the Capitol on January 6th. He didn't engage in any violence whatsoever. He cheered them on during the attack. Yes, he was charged with a misdemeanor for violating law, but it's very clear, as Judge Lutic said, and as the 14th Amendment has been interpreted, you don't need a conviction. You don't need to be charged with insurrection. So if you look at that New Mexico case, which the Supreme Court of New Mexico has essentially affirmed, that's the law of New Mexico right now, saying an insurrection is what we saw on January 6th, as contemplated by the 14th Amendment. It is time for Secretary of States, even Republican ones, to bring it to a head now. Not wait later. Let's bring it to a head now. It's got to go through the courts. There's going to have to be hearings.
Right, because the Secretary of State who does that is immediately going to have a lawsuit filed against them, right?
Of course there should be.
So, but the problem is, as I spoke to Jenna Griswold, the Secretary of State from Colorado last week, she said nobody's filed for anything yet. No one in America is running for president at the moment. Saying on Fox News that you're running for president does not actually a presidential candidate make until the day you file with the Secretary of State's office. Now, what are you suggesting people do about this?
I'm suggesting people send, and I drafted a form, email if they like, and it's in my Substack newsletter. They can literally email me, dean@deanofradio.com, and I will send it to them, urging them to consider the issue now, to look at it now, to look at the case from New Mexico now, look at the history of how the 14th Amendment has been applied. You don't need any kind of conviction. That's such a key point. People bring up, well, he wasn't convicted. It doesn't matter. This 14th Amendment enacted after the Civil War was to prevent those people who tried to destroy our nation from the outside from coming back in and destroying it from the inside. So it's never been more relevant than Donald Trump. And I'll say one other thing, Ali. Do you remember in 2016 that Donald Trump brought up Ted Cruz being born in Canada?
Yes, very well.
You're born in Canada.
Because I'm born in Canada and he wasn't there,
And he said this is going to be a precarious situation for the GOP.
Because they're going to be mired in lawsuits and litigation and questions.
And he also said this should be answered now. Well, the Trump standard says this should be answered now.
Right.
It really should. If a Secretary of State would have the courage, even a Republican one, who for their own party says, I want this resolved
so
in the next
so I can make him president when he decides to run.
Say right now, Secretary of State says you're banned from it. There's emergent appeal to the Supreme Court ultimately. Say by January, Donald Trump's disqualified. Well, the GOP has 8 months, their convention, to pick a new candidate, to have their debates, to raise money for that person. Imagine this goes all the way to September, October of next year, and then he's disqualified, and the reaction then would be, it would be unsettling, it would be wrong. But Donald Trump, in my view, doesn't belong on the ballot. He belongs in a prison cell. But that's going to take care of itself with the criminal justice system. What we can do now is use every legal means we have to protect our nation from a man who attempted a coup to end our democratic republic, a man who's the leader of a fascist movement, and I say that academically it's correct, use every means possible. Because if we don't, historians will look back at us and go, why didn't they do everything legally?
Right. Someone
to
actually
save their
spelled
republic?
out in their own constitution how you do this.
You want to save our democratic republic? Do something. Send an email to your Secretary of State. Call your Secretary of State. Let them start. And there's already lawsuits being filed. New Mexico, it was filed by a voter. If you're a registered voter in the state, you can bring the lawsuit.
Right.
And if you got the wherewithal, do it now. Let's bring this to a head now. It's better for everyone, Democrats and Republicans, to be blunt.
This guy's good. You should have a radio show.
I try my best, Alec.
Good to see you, my friend.
Nice to see you as well.
Dean Obeidallah is an attorney and is an MSNBC daily columnist. He's the host of the SiriusXM The Dean Obeidallah Show.